sign of rain. Creek's gone dry, no sign of rain. Creek's gone dry, no sign of rain. Out on the tall grass prairie.
Okay, the first question, I'm going to kind of combine some of those, and they've seen these questions, by the way, but I would, because just for time here, most surprising, most dangerous, or most challenging, to me, those maybe kind of go together. And so let's go backwards. Let's start down here with Duane.
Well, there's a lot of instances where probably some of this audience has been involved in those too. With, I think probably early on, one of the stories that I was thinking about was I got pretty good at roping out the back of a pickup.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the driver was usually the rancher, and he thought he knew his pasture pretty well, but every once in a while, he'd hit a ditch. So as a veterinarian, you don't want to become known as a roper because that just causes all kinds of problems. But on the other hand, it's nice to get your work done and get on to the next call. So I was up north of Allen in the fall of the year, and back in the 70s, and most of you will probably remember, anaplasmosis was a big problem. And we always were doctoring cows or bulls that had anaplas. Well, when they got really sick, they were just a little bit wild. So we were up on this ranch, and he said, she's out in the pasture, but she won't go very far. Common answer, I bet. We did get her roped, got her treated, and I had a lariat that had the quick release on it, so you could just release it real quick. And I had a gentleman named Albert Harris that always went with one of us, either Dr. Barr or myself, my dad. It was a real good help. Was a retired foreman of Anderson Cattle Company. So I said, Albert, can you release the cow? Well, there was a little bit of rawhide on that deal, and he pulled it. Well, the thing didn't quite release because she had a lot of pressure on it. So he kind of messed around with it. It finally released. Well, the rancher was in the pickup. I was in the pickup. Albert was not in the pickup. The first person that the cow saw was Albert. Sun was going down in the west, and on the third trick around the pickup, we let Albert in. Okay.
Just go down the line. Yeah. Bill?
I have probably the most surprising call that I was on. Turned out I'll do a little comparison of technology over the years. I was called on a cow trying to have a calf, and upon my examination, I immediately saw what her issue was. So I did a cesarean on her and delivered a two-headed calf that was alive. And the calf lived for about an hour or so until I got the cow all sewed back up. To me, the interesting part was in today, if that would have happened, that would have been on social media, probably from coast to coast, and no one then had a camera. So the only recollection of that incident is my memory. So I hope you believe me.
Actually, I had a two-headed calf story too. I guess surprising, maybe dangerous, maybe doesn't fit the ranch story, but dangerous maybe. I got a call on a Saturday morning, and some people had a skunk in their garage that just fought with their dogs, a cow dog and a bird dog in a pen, and they didn't know what to do. They had the policeman there, and he didn't know what to do. So I went down. I had a long-handled snare, and they said, he's in the garage. And I said, okay, I'll go in and maybe snare him. We can get him out of there, and he'll probably spray. But they said, well, the only problem is our daughter's getting married today, and all the stuff is in the garage. So I said, well, let me go in, and I'll find out where he's at, and then maybe we can figure out what to do. So I went in the garage by myself, and he was down underneath the workbench, clear back in the corner. So he wasn't going to come flying out, I hoped. And we opened the garage door very slowly. We got everything out of there. And I said, okay, now once he's out, I said, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to snare him if I can. And he's going to spray, so the garage is going to stink, but I'll get him out here. And so I did that, got a hold of him. He didn't fight or anything, but he did spray, and pretty strong, real strong. But I avoided getting it on me. And I took it out and I held it on the ground. And I asked the policeman, I said, shoot it so we can check it for rabies. He said, I'm not going to do it. So the owner, or the father of the young bride, said, I will. And he walked up behind me with a shotgun. And that was a surprising element the second time. So then I had to put it in my van and take it to the clinic to get it ready for checking for rabies. And that wasn't real pleasant either. But the skunk did have rabies, and the dogs had been vaccinated. So all we had to do is revaccinate them. But it was surprising.
Did I hear you say it did have rabies?
It did have rabies.
Yeah.
That happens a lot around here. It's crazy how many rabies cases we see. I'm going to be a little bit of a hog and mesh a couple of things. First thing, a reminder is, as you guys know, if you work with livestock, it is dangerous at times. I think we've all been in those scenarios. When I first moved back in the 90s, I'd been working out in Southwest Kansas in a lot of feed yards, hydraulic chutes, a lot of metal, a lot of protection, a lot of safety. Get back here, and some of these homemade chutes are kind of really questionable. So how many of you guys have had to climb out the top of the chute when you're preg checking? Yeah, when those back gates don't work, it's pretty scary. It's pretty scary. My husband and I, we got married here in 21, and one of our first dates, I ran up to Manhattan because someone had dropped a cow off at the Marion clinic. I was going to run it up to the Henrikson clinic to put it on the layover table. And of course, she came around the gate and just beat the heck out of me. And so at the end of the day, we met up in Manhattan because I wanted to go to urgent care to make sure I didn't have a concussion. But the surprising thing that I've done is, of course, on a Saturday or Sunday like this, I had a horse guy call me. Whenever you get lacerations, we've had a million lacerations to fix. This was the first time that the horse got put into the stock, and he brought the ear in a Ziploc bag in saline on ice and wanted me to sew it back on. I did. I took a picture of it. It looked lovely. Guess what it looked like about a week later? But you know what the surprising thing was that I never even thought about that. By sewing it on, it was the perfect bandage. So when it sloughed off, there was this pretty pink tissue over the top. So I guess I was excited about that.
Mine's another cow story, because cows. My husband and I have a running joke that New Year's Eve we always spend in the clinic in some form or fashion. And when we moved back to Council Grove, it continued. New Year's Eve, probably my first or second one up here. And I get a call, the classic, well, she's calving, she's down, don't worry, doc, she's not going to move, she can't get up. Lies, nothing but lies. They don't have a head catch, they don't have a trailer, they have no way to catch her. I'm like, okay, well, I charge by the throw because I am not a roper. So we get out there. Of course, she gets up. It's cold. It's icy. I think it was like 2 degrees. And we ended up finally, she slipped on some ice. So we finally got a rope on her. I did a C-section on this heifer at midnight. So happy New Year's Eve for me, by headlamp and cart by truck light as she was stretched between 2 cows. Got a live calf. The heifer lived for a couple of days per section. It was pretty rough and rowdy out there. But yeah, that was probably our most challenging one. I have never done another C-section with a cow tied between 2 trucks, and I don't particularly want to do another C-section with a cow between 2 trucks.
Okay. I'll just let you go. We'll just go back down.
Okay.
Give us your best horse or dog story, maybe.
Oh. So this is a dog story. Little Boston Terrier. Old. Actually, he's an old Boston Terrier now. Kind of vomiting on and off for a couple of days. Finally, we're like, okay, let's take an x-ray. He's not getting better. Pull an x-ray up. And there's 3 things that look like little cowboy hats in his gut. And I'm like, what is that? He's a Boston. What could he possibly eat? Take him to surgery, pull him out. Open one up. Little rubber ducky, number 1. Little rubber ducky, number 2. And little number ducky number 3. They come out, still have their faces and everything. I still, to this day, have no idea how he managed to eat all 3 rubber duckies because they were bigger than his mouth. And he's doing great today.
So he was a duck hunting dog, I
He
guess.
was a duck hunting
Yeah.
Boston Terrier.
I kind of gave my horse story a little too quick. But I will tell the one thing. I have got, cow dogs are awesome around here. Some of them maybe a little bit more challenging than others. Some of them listen very good, and some of them kind of don't. I've got a guy that when he got his, they had a poodle on the farm when I first started working for their family. Poodles in mud running cattle is horrible, especially when they bring them to you to groom them, Yeah, poodles don't work very good on the farm if you have all that long hair and mud. So he got an Australian Shepherd, and he just had gotten this Australian Shepherd, and we were out there preg checking. And sometimes we don't have a lot of people because, cattle are kind of more settled when there's not that many people. So I think that day it was him and me and maybe one person pushing up the cattle afterwards and his dog. And she was young. She's a little not miniature, not full size, just kind of a medium size. She was supposed to be a miniature Australian Shepherd. She grew a little bigger. Hadn't been worked very much. And so where the chute went out, we put the cows this way, but then if the open cows were going to go, we had to go behind this gate. We stuck her behind the gate. She was probably 11 months old, and we stuck her behind the gate and preg checked 50 cows. And at the end of the afternoon, she was still standing behind the gate.
I think about any horse story anytime working with horses can create a story. But for me, probably the most memorable, and this happened back in the, I think, mid 80s, early 80s. Somebody could probably tell me exactly what year it was, but it's when the Budweiser Clydesdales came to the Strong City Rodeo. I think some people remember that. They were in the parade, and they were in the arena one of the nights when they did a show. They had an accident, had a wreck, and I was called down later in the evening. Probably it was 9 o'clock or so. That one of the Clydesdales had some blood underneath his tail, and they were a little bit worried about it. Thought that maybe a harness of the one behind it had gone up and punctured right around the rectum. So I came down, and the trainer told me about it and asked me to take a look, but he had to get me a step stool because I needed to get up to where it's such a magnificent animal. I'd been around Belgians and I've been around Percheron, but never something this big. And I got right up behind him, and of course he was walking underneath him and everything, so I didn't worry about getting kicked. And I wrapped the tail and got it out of the way, and there was a little puncture, probably about an inch long, right beside the rectum. And what I was worried about is how deep it was, because if it went into the abdomen, it could be pretty severe. If it was just superficial, it'd probably heal. But I couldn't probe deep enough to find out how deep it was. So I told him I was going to flush it with saline and an antibiotic and see if it came back on me a little bit, then we'd probably okay. But if it didn't come back, I was going to put enough in there to know for sure that we could be have bigger problems. As I was standing up there getting ready to do it, he looked at me and said, Doc, if he passes gas, you're going to be a mess. Actually, he said, if he farts, he's going to blow your head off. But anyway, I did it, and it did come back out. So I figured it wasn't very deep, and he was going to, I left him enough stuff to flush the wound the next morning. And I had some time, so I ran back down there because I wanted to see this horse again, because they're so magnificent and well taken care of. When I got down there, the trainer was coming out of his camper. And I said, how's he doing this morning? He said, he's doing fine. He said, remember what I told you last night? And I said, yeah. He said, I was changing my shirt.
Those Clydesdales, I think they get really good care. I'm halfway surprised they don't have their own vet travels with them, So
Can I tell a cat story?
you can, well, sure, we'll allow
I
that.
think every clinic has its own resident cat in the clinic. And we had one called Stretch. And I kind of inherited that from my sister-in-law. A friend of theirs had moved away from Wichita and couldn't take their cat. So she volunteered me to take care of their cat. And we had that cat several years until he got underneath a car tire. But in the meantime, he was just a friend of everybody. People would be up at the counter, and he'd laid out on their checkbook, and he roamed in and out of the clinic at will. And if your window was down on your car, he may have ridden home with you, and then they'd discover him and they'd have to bring him back. Well, he had the ability to roam anywhere he wanted in the clinic, and he learned how to open all the cabinet doors. So one night we were closing up and we could not find Stretch. And we looked every place and we thought, well, no one saw him go outside, so he must still be in there someplace, and he could have been holed up in any of the cabinets. So we just left and went home. Came back the next morning, I walked into my office and I could hear him meowing. Well, I'd been working in my office there and had the filing drawers open on a file cabinet, and I could hear him. So I pull out the bottom drawer, and there he is, clear at the back of that drawer in the filing cabinet. I had closed the drawer on him. I tell people we'd have found him quicker if he'd have been in the front, filed under C for cat, but he went clear at the back under Z for zebra.
Well, you've given me time to think of so many stories that I don't know which one to tell. I think I'll tell one that's a little bit different. It has to do with your father-in-law, Frank Gaddy. I was called one Sunday morning by Frank that he had a mare in trouble. And I don't know if most veterinarians, at least me, always dreaded that call. Because a mare, when she contracts, can actually break your arm pretty easy. So I drove out to Frank's, tubed the horse so that when she did let down, she couldn't stress on her diaphragm quite as much. I examined the mare. She was laying down. She was halter. She was gentle. I found out the problem was a hoof was back. So I had worked slowly and I finally got the end of the hoof, got a little snare on it, and was just ready to start out with it. She decides to strain, and she strains, and I'm locked in her. I can't get out. In addition, she rolls. So here I go, I roll with her. Still have the hoof in my hand. Get done. I'm still checking myself out. I'm okay. I look up and I see F.M. Gaddy. Evidently, he had downsized already. I said, "What are you doing here? You should be here where I am." Well, he had downsized like Frank's, and had moved to Kansas City and was doing small animal. End of story. We got the colt all right. Unfortunately, the colt was dead. The mare was okay. We didn't rip anything. We didn't do any problem there. And went home, and I still have problems with this shoulder.
Out on the tall grass prairie. Ground is wet, the wildflowers bloom. Ground is wet, the wildflowers bloom. Ground is wet and the wildflowers bloom. Out on the tall grass prairie.